Are your solos feeling boring? Are you stuck playing the same scales and arpeggios over and over and over again? Well, I've got the fix for that. Here's what they don't teach you about soloing. I am talking, of course, about scale pallets. So the groove you just heard was based around a C mixolydian scale, which is just the major with a flat 7. Before we move on, it's important to know that for this scale and for the rest of the scales that we're going to talk about, you can use the scale and all of its relative modes. Step 1 before we start anything is when you're soloing or playing a bass line or doing anything within a diatonic mode, don't just think about the mode. Think about all of its relative scales as well. You build a scale going like this. When you're using all the relative scales, you're combining all of the scales into one long scale that spans the entire length of the fretboard. Still, even if you're using all of these relative modes, it can start to feel boring. You're playing the same exact notes. No matter which scale you're playing, it's going to be C, D, E, F, G, A, and B flat every single time. So let's change that up. Just like the diatonic modes are a collection of scales that relate back to the tonic, this scale palette is going to be a set of different scales that vary slightly from the original scale. Now, hear me out for a second. For example, we're working in C mixolydian. In the bass line you heard in the beginning of this video, I wasn't just using the notes from C mixolydian. I was bringing in a lot of different notes from outside of the key. And the way that you do that is very important. Now, there's a lot of different ways of doing this, but we're going to focus on these scale palettes. So finally, how do we build these scale palettes? In this specific case, the track is going to be giving like mixolydian vibes, so we're going to be building the whole thing around C mixolydian. And in order to get these different scales, we're going to manipulate the notes of the scale itself to give it some new and interesting colors. And we can move it in different directions. Let me show you. First, we're going to start in C mixolydian. And if you'll notice, if we flat the third of that scale, we take this E and we make it an E flat, we end up with a C Dorian scale. So by this logic, you could say that C Dorian is a half step away from C mixolydian. That's pretty damn close, and it's close enough where you can switch between those two scales over a C mixolydian chord progression and it will still sound pretty good. That's where that minor third comes in. Like when you hear that all the time in music, when it's a major solo in a major key, everything's major, and then somebody hits that. And it's like, yeah, nice. We can take that concept even further. We take C Dorian, flat the 6, we end up with C minor. So you could say that C Dorian is a half step away from C minor. So you could play C Aeolian over a C mixolydian chord progression. The scale is only 2 half steps away. That's pretty damn close. This pattern can go farther and farther and farther away from the home scale, and the farther you go, the more out it's going to sound. So our palette, as it stands now, is C mixolydian, C Dorian, and C minor. We can use these 3 scales because they're a half step apart from each other and they're close enough where you can play it over a C mixolydian chord progression and it will still sound pretty good. But be careful, not all scales are going to sound great. And that's up to you to decide which ones sound good and which ones fit your playing style. That's one direction we moved. We moved from C mixolydian to C Aeolian by way of C Dorian. Just like you can use all the relative modes of C mixolydian, you can also use all the relative modes of C Dorian and C Aeolian. So already we've broken out of the mixolydian box. We've broken out of that pentatonic box that you've been stuck in. Instead of using one scale, we now have 21 different scales at our disposal that are going to sound pretty good in the key of C. So let's try moving a different direction. This is one of my favorite ways to go. I like to go into the kind of descending altered dominant category. So once again, we're going to start back at home at C mixolydian. Instead of lowering the 3 to get to Dorian like we did before, we're instead going to lower the 6 and get to mixolydian flat 6. Mixolydian flat 6 is the 5th mode of melodic minor, so you can use all the relative modes of F melodic minor over this scale. So from mixolydian flat 6, we can then flat the 2. And now we're at Phrygian dominant, or mixolydian flat 9 flat 13. This is the 5th mode of harmonic minor, and you can use all the relative modes of F harmonic minor. Let's try going a different way. We've went minor, we've went altered. Let's move in a little bit of a brighter direction. So once again, we're going to start at C mixolydian. If you take C mixolydian and raise the 4, you end up with C Lydian dominant, which is the 4th mode of melodic minor. So you can use all of the relative modes of G melodic minor over this progression. Finally, if you take this Lydian dominant scale and you raise the 7 to make it a natural 7, you end up with Lydian. The way that you move away from a key is equally as important as the notes that you're playing. If you have an idea about what you're doing, it's gonna sound like you know what you're doing. I know that sounds insane, but hear me out here. When you're playing music, it's about convincing the listener and convincing the other musicians that you have an idea and it's a good one. So by knowing what you're doing and by having an idea behind it, it's gonna sound like there's an idea behind it. It's gonna sound more like a phrase. It's gonna sound more like you're saying something with your music, rather than if you're just wiggling your fingers around the pentatonic scale or the mixolydian scale. That sounds fine, it sounds correct, but there's more to it. It gets old, it gets boring. This is a great place to start taking your solos to the next level. And if you're new to this kind of thing, even just taking C mixolydian to C Dorian, just switching between those two, that's a great place to start. The scale palette doesn't have to be so big. It can be 2 scales, it can be 3 scales, but switching between different scales that are a half step apart is a great way to start making your playing a hell of a lot more interesting. The last thing I want to talk about before we wrap up is we can take this concept to the moon. So 2 of the ways we mentioned earlier, we moved to C Aeolian by way of C Dorian to go minor, and we moved to C Phrygian dominant by way of C mixolydian flat 6 to go for more of an altered direction. Now, from C minor, if you flat the 2, you end up with C Phrygian. And if you take C Phrygian and you raise the 3rd, you're right back at C Phrygian dominant. So if you wanted to make a loop, you could start soloing in C mixolydian, you could flat the 3 and start soloing in C Dorian, flat the 6, move to Aeolian, flat the 2, move to C Phrygian, raise the 3rd, get to C Phrygian dominant, which remember is one of the directions we headed in. Then raise the 2 and get back to C mixolydian flat 6. Finally, naturalize the 6 and you're back at C mixolydian. There's a ton of different ways to do this. I encourage you to get creative and make your own palettes. I would also recommend downloading the backing track that you heard in the beginning of this video. I specifically made this backing track to be open and to include room for a ton of different scales and a ton of different sounds. You could go major, you could go minor, you could go altered, you could go Lydian. You could play so many different things over this and they'll all sound pretty good. And if you want access to that, check out my website. The link is in the description, maxparati.com. All you have to do is sign up with your email, go to the tabs and backing track section, click on this video, and all of the information will be found right below. If you guys enjoyed this kind of content, make sure to hit the like button and the subscribe button for more like this, and leave me a comment. Let me know about your favorite soloing techniques. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.